Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Thanks to Kojiko TV, your TV. This is the program where we get to talk about what matters to Oakville the most. And today, I'm joined by Marc Taraso, who is on the job all the time about one of Oakville's most important matters, to judge by what I hear from. I hear from people all the time about noisy motorcycles, noisy cars, speeding cars, and then every holiday season when the ride stops start, I hear from people saying, "I wasn't either drinking." So, Marc Taraso, how are you today?
Very good, sir. Thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate this.
That's quite a different rig you're in today than you were famous for a few years ago when you and another constable were the bike cops.
Yeah, that's right. Traded the bike for a patrol truck now instead. Picked up the other duties as required bit, so a little bit more equipment to carry than my bike affords.
Well, you and Matt were doing bike riding, distracted driving enforcement before it got famous and fashionable. You made it fashionable.
But yeah, the enforcement on the bike, we kind of made it fashionable and kind of picked up as a bit more of a trend after that. So it's picked up quite across the GTA now of distracted driving enforcement by bike. So, and which is great. The more enforcement we can have for distracted driving, the better.
Now, when you were a boy growing up in Halton, were you a big bike rider, or did bike riding come later?
No, I started riding my bike early on. I was doing laps around the court where I grew up incessantly. So it was something I loved doing right from the get-go when I grew up. And then coming to policing was one of the first things I asked for was the bike course, so I could go out on patrol on the bike. I've always worked in Oakville. There's hundreds of kilometers of trails in Oakville. There's our beautiful downtown core. So biking just kind of fits in naturally into my responsibilities. And just Oakville had the great terrain for it. So it was just something I loved doing.
Well, and as I understand it, you're more famous on Twitter than I am, because
Well, I don't know.
I
I don't
think
know
you
about,
have more followers than the mayor.
yeah, and hopefully they're all real followers. None of them are bot accounts, hopefully. So I think I just I have some content that people are interested in. So I think that keeps people interested in my account, which is great and helps showcase to people the work that I'm doing in the community. But not only me, I'm trying to be a representative of what the work is that all the police officers in Oakville and Halton are doing. Just I'm fortunate enough to have the voice to share what I do, but that can be replicated 700 times over through all the other police officers in Halton.
Now, was it the bike patrol that fed the Twitter fame, or how did that happen?
Yeah, when I started in the community mobilization unit, it was kind of a tool that was offered to us to share with the community what we were doing in that role. I think because my bike patrol work kind of fascinated people, that we were actually able to stop a car from a bicycle and catch distracted drivers from a bicycle and the odd dangerous transport truck from a bicycle. I think that's what kind of got the buzz out there, if you so will, about me and Constable Baker being out on patrol, and kind of led to the Twitter popularity, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we always wonder if social media is real. I saw somebody who said something the other day. Remember, social media is not real life, and but maybe it is.
It certainly can be, and it could certainly your personality on Twitter could certainly follow you into real life. So,
Oh, don't I know that? Oh boy.
always trying to remind people: be careful what you post on social media, and what you do when you go to apply for the job, because those things will come up behind you.
Yeah, people go back with a comb and a rake. You
Right.
mentioned something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is the checking on the bad trucks. We got religion here in Halton against bad trucks when a couple of people got killed by dangerous parts flying off those trucks, and we're still taking too many trucks are on the road, and we have blitzes every year to get them. I did not know that you actually got one from a bike, and so all kudos to you for that.
It was actually during the start of Safe Start last year, our annual back to school campaign. I was heading out to go do distracted driving enforcement, and this transport truck pulled out in front of me, and it was just a complete disaster. It was, you know, an accident waiting to happen, and coupled with that being during Project Safe Start, kids are back to school. You know, everybody's rushing about to get kids on school. It was just a recipe waiting to happen for a disaster. And fortunately, I was just right place, right time, and was able to get him stopped safely from my bike. And the truck was ended up taken out of service. And I think there was probably about 24 charges laid between the driver and the company for that debacle.
Well, thank goodness for that. I mean, that's probably at least one life saved. So thank you for that. I wonder, do we ever use bikes on the ride stops, or seems to me the ride stops are much more sophisticated with complicated traffic control patterns and everything.
Yeah, I can't remember a time I've used a bicycle for impaired driving enforcement. That'll be, if I do, that'll be a first. I'll have to figure out how to transport the arrested party back to the station on my bike. So that'll be an interesting one.
Oh, you could call backup or call a taxi.
There you go. Which is what they should do in the first place before they get behind the wheel.
Well, that's right. They could wind up in the car they should have been in.
Exactly.
Now, the hottest thing all summer, once patios took off, boy, did the complaints about noisy cars and motorcycles take off. And I still get complaints about them. And they often are accompanied by a suggestion that we're not doing anything. Tell us a little bit about what we're doing about it.
Well,
you get some very impressive numbers.
1,400 and some odd charges in 5 months related to noise. I'd say we are doing something about it, and we're working real hard to do something about it. Unfortunately, the amount of noisy cars seems to be multiplying by the day, but we are out there vigorously addressing this issue and making a dent in it. So I can assure everybody we are addressing it, and we are hearing the residents' complaints because the citizens complain to us directly, and as you know, they complain to town councilors and up through council, and the councilors are helping us address those issues as well, which is really it's nice to see that this is a community issue and it's community working to address it, right from town council, police officers, residents themselves. So it's great that it's like a full-on approach to addressing this issue. So it's really great to see that.
Well, you make a nice point there about how our police officers are largely residents too. And I can tell you that the police board is a big fan of what I call hometown policing. So it's great to see that. My wife and I were on a patio on Lakeshore one evening, beautiful day, and a motorcycle went by. It was just horrendous. And my wife said to me, "I thought you guys were enforcing this." And I said, "Well, they must have the night off, or else they're just not enforcing it when I'm there."
We thought you might enjoy some background noise for your late night dinner there.
Oh boy, it's amazing what people do. What do they say when you stop them? I know normally you do this. Don't we always try to do a progressive kind of education on enforcement? So don't you start off with, "Are you aware?" I mean, what happens when you talk to these people?
Yeah, we tried to do a pretty big education campaign before we rolled out the project. I was talking about mufflers before it was, dinner table talk. We've been talking about these modifications that are legal. We've been putting it out there on social media to try and get people to recognize that this is an issue and take corrective action before it had to lead to enforcement. Unfortunately, some people chose not to heed those warnings and chose to continue to drive their vehicles that were not fit for the road. So we took it to an enforcement campaign coupled with ongoing education. I mean, we were weekly, we would be discussing with a different media outlet about the project and what people could do to stay on the right side of the law. But unfortunately, some people just continue to ignore that message. One of the common themes I get when we stop these drivers is that it's a hobby, or it's what they call car enthusiasts, and that's what they do. Now, I'm all for hobbies. I'm all for, a car enthusiast club, but I don't know how you consider cutting off a muffler from your vehicle a hobby. We have a law on the books, and it says that your motor vehicle has to have a muffler if it's got a combustion engine. So those with a Tesla, they don't need a muffler, and that's okay. But those with an internal combustion engine have to have a muffler, and the law is very clear. So it's I don't know how you argue the point that you feel entitled to take off your muffler. The law is right there in the books that says you have to have one, and it has to be a proper muffler, and it has to muffle the sound. It's the root word of muffler is muffle. So And some people seem to, for whatever reason, decide they don't want to have the muffler and they want to have the extra noise, which is disruptive to all our residents.
So does it make them feel better? I'm making a big noise.
I'm not going to try and get into why the specifics for each individual. I think each individual has a different motivation, if you will, as to why they do it. Some people say it's performance related. Some people say it's just, it makes them feel good to make that noise. Other people plead ignorance. Oh, what do you mean my car's loud? Well, I could hear it from 6 blocks away before I could see it. So, but I think they try lots of different excuses to see what will get past us, but nothing really gets past us.
And is it all kinds of people, or is there certain kinds of people that do this? I can tell you that here in my neighborhood, on my street, I get the impression it's all kinds of people.
Yes, and it certainly is. I mean, you get every type of driver that commits these offenses, and it knows no bounds of gender, age. So it to me it's not to me it's the sound of the vehicle that I hear, and then I conduct the traffic stop. And regardless of other factors, it's the offenses that I'm concerned about, and the quality of life of our residents that they're affecting by having those defects. And it's not just sometimes the noise, it's the safety violations that go along with it. In, I'd say, over 50% of the cases that I stopped the vehicle for noise, I was finding some significant safety violations on the vehicle to go along with it. And in the other 50% of cases, I was finding driver's license violations, insurance violations, license plate violations. So it was almost, the noise was just the instigator for the stop, and then I was finding all these issues afterwards.
So the noise was kind of a, hey, look at me, and brought them probably the wrong kind of attention.
Just before I came on the air here with you today, sir, one of the vehicles I stopped, it was coming towards me, and I could hear it before it crested over the QEW. I pulled in behind it, stopped it, and the vehicle is not insured at all. So we've got a vehicle that's not fit for the road, and they have no contract of automobile insurance. So now if they strike a pedestrian, this pedestrian is on their own, outside of what OHIP can provide for coverage, physio, all that kind of stuff. There's no insurance to cover them. So again,
Whoa.
the noise was just the catalyst to me finding this car.
So in some cases, I want to reinterpret the whole noisy thing as it's like a cry for help.
Actually, yeah, it's just like, hey, look at me, I'm making.
I'm out of control.
I've got stuff going on too, so come take a look.
Holy cow! Now, are people going to relax now that the big blitz is over, and or what's the future, or is every officer going to be out there looking for you?
We're not letting up on this. I've been receiving complaints about this in my previous role when we talked about me being on the bicycle when I was in the community unit. I've been receiving these types of complaints for the past 4 or 5 years, especially from our BIA areas where people are trying to enjoy patios and they get these loud cars ripping by. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the businesses. It's not fair to the residents. And now I'm finally in a position in the traffic unit where I can address this. And we've seen from doing this enforcement that it's not just the noise, it's those safety violations that go along with it. And there's serious concern for the safety of our roadways when we have unfit vehicles on our roads. So not only is this going to continue, but it's going to continue with more vigor. We're developing a training program right now so that even frontline patrol officers who don't have that traffic inclination like we do are going to receive some training onto what to be on the lookout for, what to identify as potential safety violations, and how to lay those charges themselves, or when to recognize that it's time for me to call a traffic officer to come take a look at this so that we can have some further inspections done on this vehicle. Because we don't want unfit vehicles on our roadways, and we certainly don't want these big pollutants on our roadways. Because on top of the mufflers being removed, we're seeing a greater trend of catalytic converters being removed purposefully from vehicles and now emitting all those emissions straight into the atmosphere. And I don't think I even need to mention why that's a problem in 2020 right now. So
I remember back when catalytic converters came in, if you had any kind of performance car, people wanted to take them out, and because there was a strong belief that you'd get 10 extra horsepower or something if you took that off. But yeah, I think everybody's on that page now.
Well, and what I could say is there's a lot of people that they're building performance cars, if you will, and that's one of the reasons for taking off the catalytic converter, as you mentioned, is getting those extra couple horsepower. The maximum posted speed limit in the province of Ontario is 110 kilometers per hour, and the most basic car off the line that's on our roadways can go 110 kilometers per hour, no problem, with catalytic converters and mufflers installed. So the reason holds no weight, no bearing, and it's certainly not safety oriented, which is what we're after, is keeping our roads safe. So unfortunately, the law is there for those people who don't want it to be, but the law is there, and it requires them to have these parts for everybody's safety.
So if people go too fast, they can have their car taken away. If they're driving a car that you discover is unfit for the road, are they walking home? What happens?
It's certainly so. I mean, we're reasonable. Some defects are easily repairable. So sometimes they'll leave with some tickets, and they'll either get their car towed out of there, or they could pull it off the road into a parking lot to get, a tire fixed or something like that. But what I'm finding is multiple defects, and where I'm finding 5, 6, 7, 8 defects, we can't let that vehicle return to the roadway. We're taking the license plates off the vehicle. We're seizing the permit for the vehicle, and the permit and the license plate are being returned to the MTO, and the vehicle is being classified as unfit. So now that vehicle has to be towed, it has to have repairs made, and it has to get a new safety if the driver intends on putting that vehicle back on the road before they can go get a permit back from the MTO. And so now there's an element of forcing those repairs to be made, or just deregistering the vehicle, not having it fit for the road anymore. And that's the way of getting these unfit vehicles off the road.
Yeah, I'm sure if a person is driving down the highway and one of these unsafe vehicles, a really bad one, is in front of you, the last thing you want is for a car to come apart in front of you.
And I've seen some of the plates I've taken off cars. I've had cars where they're missing wheel fasteners, and we've all seen what's happened, every year at tire changeover season, when wheel fasteners don't get put on properly or torqued on to the correct torque specifications, we see wheels flying off, and wheels flying off cars kills people. It doesn't have to be a big truck tire. We had an incident earlier this year where a pickup truck tire came flying off, and it killed the driver of an oncoming vehicle. So I'm seeing these modified cars, and for whatever reason, they're missing 1, 2, or 3 wheel fasteners. The car's just not fit for the road. It's a ticking time bomb waiting to kill somebody. So, and it's little things like that I've seen. Drivers, for whatever reason, deactivating their power steering. So now they've got a car that's meant to have a power steering rack, but they've deactivated the power steering pump, and they've reverted to manual steering on a power steering rack. So it begs the question, if they're driving down the road and through no fault of their own, but a little kid runs in front of them, how can they do emergency steering to steer out of the way and give that child another chance?
Wow.
We have standards on our roadways for those vehicles to be on the road. And one of those is, if the manufacturer built it with power steering, it needs to have power steering.
It sounds like some people are not totally comfortable with living in civilization.
And you know what? And that's the key, is like, if you want a track car, have a track car, but don't put it on our roadways. Tow to the track. Basic things, airbags, something that was developed in the early 90s to save lives. And drivers are taking out their airbags for fashion purposes. They're replacing it with an aftermarket racing steering wheel for use on a public roadway. Most of the time the horn doesn't work because they don't bother setting up the horn again. And now there's no airbag. So what does that mean? If they get in a collision and they suffer some trauma to their face, Ontario taxpayers are now paying for that OHIP bill to remedy those injuries that happened, that could have been completely avoided had they had their airbag in. But now they're taking the airbag out for aesthetics.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk to you without diving into what made you famous in the first place: distracted driving, or enforcement against distracted driving. And the reason it's fresh in my mind is a young friend of mine got T-boned by a teenager who apparently was on her cell phone while she was driving, and just blew through a red light at full speed and just bam, right into the door, that, the driver's door of my friend's car. Car was totaled. Airbag saved him and his dad. thank the Lord. Gee whiz, thank you so much for the leadership you showed on fighting distracted driving in Halton.
I appreciate you saying that, and I don't think it clues into people sometimes how dangerous it is. We call it part of the fatal four. It's one of the leading causes of death on our roads, and it warrants all the enforcement that we give it because of that. And I don't think anybody in our area doesn't have a story about how distracted driving has impacted them, whether it's from being cut off by somebody that they can see on their phone, or a near miss, or like in your case, somebody who's been involved in a collision because of a distracted driver. I stopped a young lady a couple of years ago who was using her phone while driving, and she told me that her uncle was killed by a distracted driving incident. And I thought, you have the number one reason in your back pocket as to why not to use your phone. Yet here we are today.
Wow.
It's tragic how common distracted driving is, but we are working our hardest to root it out and eliminate it as best as we can.
It's amazing what people will keep doing after striking home that close, your own uncle.
I don't know what other message to deliver to that person to change their mind other than a ticket. It's all.
Yeah. Like, we need maybe bigger fines, I don't know, or confiscation of license.
And we keep raising the fine. So when I started 13 years ago, and the distracted driving legislation came on shortly thereafter, and the fine started about $150 range. We're up to a $615 fine minimum, up to a maximum of $3,000 fine, and 30-day license suspension on the top end. And people are still using their phones and driving. Like, I don't get it.
I don't either. Like, do they even know what they're risking?
And that, I think they do. And I think it's the risk versus reward calculation that's not going on properly. I need to just send a text, or I just need to, contact this person quickly, or I just needed to check something quickly. But in that just second is when tragedy strikes, and we see these fatal collisions that happen on our roadways because that driver became inattentive for that 5 seconds, where had they been paying attention, they could have applied the brakes, they could have steered, they could have anticipated what was about to happen and either prevented a fatal collision from happening, or just that whole incident not happening at all.
Now, if you're, let's give people a little bit of clarity about how it works. As I understand it, the safest, my theory is don't touch the phone or any other instrument, tablet or whatever. Is that basically what it boils down to? Just don't touch?
Yeah, the easiest way to avoid the ticket is if putting your phone away in a glove box or a center console or in the purse where you're not going to touch it at all and you're not going to use it at all. That's the safest way. Now, I understand it's 2020 and phones do more than just phone calls and text nowadays. People use them for navigation, for GPS, which can have benefits to road safety. But what they need to understand is once that vehicle is on the roadway, they can no longer manipulate that device. So if you're going to use it for your GPS or you're going to set it up for your song playlist, you need to set it before you go on the road, and then it needs to either be stowed away or mounted in a place where you can look at it without taking your eyes off the roadway and without touching it. Because as soon as you go to touch it and you go to start inputting an address or changing a song or changing a playlist, you've now breached the legislation and committed the offense.
So with most phones, recent phones at least, as I understand it, you can use your voice to make these changes. Is that permitted?
That's permitted. If you can voice activate to make the change, then you can do that. And again, I would caution that those voice prompts should be related to something that's road safety oriented. So if you're playing Pokemon Go and it's voice prompt activated, that would not be related to road safety, and that would not be okay. And I've caught people playing the Pokemon game while driving on their phone. So I use that as a caution. Just try and make sure what you're doing is somehow related to the task of driving, or one of the basic principles of phone use. So a phone call.
I had no idea that people would play a video game while driving. Like, driving isn't enough of a video game already.
And that's where people forget that driving has to be your primary task and your primary point of focus, not what's going on your phone. I mean, I've tweeted about incidents that, garnered a lot of attention, where a gentleman was watching the Toronto Maple Leafs playoffs game on his phone while driving. Another one who was watching the Raptors victory parade in Toronto on his phone while driving. And another one watching videos on his phone while driving.
Oh, unbelievable.
I don't want to scare you about what a craze that FaceTime in driving has become. So now not only are you having that distraction of a conversation in your head and driving, you're looking at a phone and interacting with somebody while you're driving. And I mean, again, recipe for disaster.
Whoa, FaceTiming while driving.
Oh,
Well, I'm almost sorry that I talked about this with you, because I did not know about that, and now I'm frightened to be on the road.
it's a scary trend, what people do behind the wheel other than driving. And that's where we have to try and remind people, the steering wheel is your focus, the road in front of you is your focus, everything else is just wait till you get to a parking lot.
Yeah, you're driving a 2-ton guided missile. You can do some serious damage if you're not totally on it.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, before we go, we should mention that haltonpolice.ca, the website, has the ability for you to tell the police where there's a problem and what kind of enforcement you think needs to be done. It's a customer friendly approach to, where do you want some policing?
That's right. There's one of our very friendly mayors often uses the term, to quote Sir Robert Peel, the people are the police are the people. And we need the willing cooperation of our public to help guide us to where they need us and where the problems are, so we can go find them, because really our citizens are our eyes out there. There's only so many police officers out there, but we've got 500,000 citizens across the region of Halton that can help guide us to the right area. So if they go online, they can file either a traffic complaint or a road watch complaint. So a traffic complaint would be, there's always speeding on 6 line between this time and this time. We'd like some extra enforcement, and we'll go out and analyze it and see if there's a problem. And a road watch complaint is, this driver with this license plate is always using their phone. And we have ways of dealing with that as well, whether it's an educational letter that's sent or some targeted enforcement that's sent to a specific area.
Well, Marc, Constable Taraso, thank you so much for this. This is, I think, very informative. And thank you for watching. I'll look for you next time on Oakville Matters.